responsibility of the corporation and what is properly the responsibility of government. We should distinguish between individual moral responsibility, individual choices, and corporate responsibility and corporate choices, recognizing that corporate money is not the same as individual money. And thirdly, we should distinguish between what is altruism and what is enlightened self-interest. And finally, we should recognize enlightened self-interest for what it is. We should not be embarrassed. The pursuit of self-interest is the fundamental cornerstone of free markets. We should recognize it for what it is. We should not be embarrassed about it. We should talk less of altruism. We should focus our attention on how to harness and channel the energies of self-interest into socially desirable goals that benefit the whole economy. And as for us as individuals, it is worthwhile reflecting on the life of Cecil John Rhodes, who was a ruthless imperialist, a brilliant businessman, but today is remembered not so much for how he amassed his power or the great wealth he created for himself, but his contribution to society through the scholarships that bear his name. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Timothy Ong, for such an inspiring speech. I would like to call upon Ms. Gina Velasco, Regional Director for Southeast Asia of Synagogues Institute, to present a token of appreciation to Mr. Timothy Ong. My sincere apology. Is there any questions and answers? Yes. I'm sorry, Mr. Ong, I'm sorry I have to call you on to say it again. Please identify yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving us the opportunity to ask to seek clarification on matters that has been raised by the learned speaker, Mr. Timothy Ong. My name is Zulkifli from AIM Alumni Club Malaysia. So you have given us a broad perspective on the role and responsibility for all the stakeholders in the organization, in the country, towards creating the right corporate social responsibilities. But I'm taking from the dimension of top management key roles in facilitating corporate social responsibilities effort. Now, how do you look at the commitment of top managers? If there's not going to be any regulation or guidelines set by the authority, more often than not, the commitment of top managers in facilitating CSR effort to be from their own goodwill. So if that's the case, how can it influence employees' effort or other stakeholders' effort in the organization in CSR? How do you look at aligning managers' values with the core purpose of an organization? Because you did mention just now, it should be distinguished, personal values with corporate values. Shouldn't that be a kind of alignment somewhere for us to ensure there is a synergy in pursuing toward CSR?
Mr. Zul?
Yeah. Another point. How do you look at the incentive and motivational factors as a way to encourage the other stakeholders in pursuing towards CSR effort? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Zulkifli, those are good questions, and it will take a long time to answer them, but I will try to answer them quickly. It is essential that we have effective government, because it is the role of government to ensure that the ground rules are clearly established. To leave corporations to determine what is socially acceptable behavior is not a long-term answer. But governments, in establishing the ground rules, need to tread a careful balancing line between measures to ensure socially responsible behavior and conditions which allow corporations to thrive. Heavy-handed government, excessive regulation will drive corporations away. And if corporations are not around, the question of corporate social responsibility becomes an irrelevant one. In the absence of government regulation, in the absence of adequate legislation, there are many ethical dilemmas. And these ethical dilemmas are not easy to resolve. It is difficult for me to prescribe a policy that would apply to all corporations. But there are good practices, and there are not so good practices, and there is a great deal that a corporation that wants to manage well can learn from. The second thing is the distinction between personal moral responsibility and corporate responsibility. I do not want to be misunderstood on this point. As human beings, each of us have our own values as to what it means to lead a good life. We have ultimately probably the same ends, but there are also differences between us. We need to distinguish between our own values and the values of the corporation, particularly when the corporation involves other stakeholders and other shareholders. I come from a Christian family, and when my father passed away, he dictated that 10% of our family profits should be directed to charitable work with priority for the work of Christian organizations. I'm Deputy Chairman of National Insurance, which is predominantly Brunei-owned, with many non-Christian shareholders. When I exercise what I consider to be my personal